So the title of the seminar, Why You're Not Getting the Sales Results You Want and How to Fix It. This is really a topic that I've wanted to talk about specifically for a while, because in the work that I've done with B2B startups, specifically technology startups, really any business, to create a successful business, there's really only two things you need to be able to do. The first is to create value, and the second is to communicate that value. And what I've found with a lot of startups is that creating value is generally something they're pretty good at. So getting an innovative product out into the market, but it's the communicating of that value where startups often struggle. And so what I want to do today is just share with you some principles and also a tool, a framework that you can use to really help you understand how to build an effective customer acquisition process. And really, you know, a customer acquisition process is a combination of sales and marketing. Really, the two dovetail together. So some key principles I want to talk about, so give you a framework that you can use. And really, I'm hoping that, you know, the output of this is that you've got some knowledge and some information you can use to really help you get sales traction early and to give you a foundation to scale growth. Because if you think about it now, with the economic impact of the coronavirus and the sort of legacy we're going to have from that, the reality for a lot of startups is investment and funding is going to become harder to come by. Not for everybody, but certainly in general, it's going to be harder to come by. So more and more companies are going to have to look at more of a bootstrap model, where they need to get cash flow positive sooner rather than later. And even if you are getting investment and funding, a lot of investors are going to be putting a lot of emphasis on that in do you understand, do you have a plan on how you're going to get to be cash flow positive as quickly as possible? So hopefully that sort of sets the context for things. In terms of the agenda, we're going to, as I say, we've got quite a lot to cover, but basically we're going to start with something that I just call the formula for sales success. It is an actual formula. It's very, very simple, but it'll help you sort of understand or set the context really for everything else we're going to talk about. Then we're going to talk about the two main sales challenges. So when I talk to startups, there's really, there's two key things that they always bring up. So we're just going to identify what those two things are. And we're then going to talk about the underlying problems, the reason people struggle with these two challenges. And then we're going to look at how to fix those problems. And that's where I'm going to introduce a framework, which is a tool that you can use, which is really about helping you create an effective customer acquisition process. And then finally, what we'll do, we'll just sort of summarize with a few key takeaways. In terms of Q&A, I'm planning to sort of, well, there's probably a natural break somewhere around the middle of this webinar where we can stop and just talk through a few things if people have questions, and we'll also leave some time at the end as well. Okay, so I hope that's good for everybody. Before I actually start though, there's a couple of things, or three things specifically, that I wanted to share with you. So just a little bit of background about me. So I've spent my whole career in the technology sector, and the first sort of third of that career was in technical roles, and then about probably, well, over 25 years ago now, I moved into sales. And in that 25 years, I've done a whole wide variety of sales roles, pretty much every sales role you can think of. And I've worked for large companies, you know, big corporates. I've worked for SMEs, and I've worked for startups. And throughout that career, there are probably three really big lessons that I've learned. And I wanted to sort of share those with you, because if you can take these lessons or these principles on board, it will help you fundamentally think about sales in a different way. I call them the three big rocks because, you know, in your sales kit bag, as it were, that, you know, these are the three big items you need in there, the three kind of principles that you need to be aware of. And you'll see these kind of play out in terms of the rest of the content we're going to go through. So the first one is that customers don't buy products, they buy outcomes. And it took me a long time to really understand this, because I came from a technical background, and I see this a lot with tech startups. We tend to think of sales as all about positioning our product. It's all about our product, you know, the features, the specifications, etc., the price points, that kind of thing. In reality, customers buy a product for a reason. They want to get some kind of outcome as a result of having that product. They're either looking to solve a problem, there's a particular pain point they've got, or there's a particular opportunity that they want to take advantage of and they need your product or solution to get there. But it's not about the product itself, it's about the outcome. And if you can start to think in terms of that, it does two things. It helps you to really understand who your target market really is, because your target market should be based on the outcome that they're trying to achieve. And they're going to look at you, your company and your product in the context of the outcome, okay? They're not focused on your product. They will at some point want to know, obviously, the details of your product, but for them, it's about the outcome. And they're looking to try and understand how effective are you, your company and your product in terms of getting them the outcome they want. So that's the key, sort of key lesson number one is to shift that perspective to customer outcome, not about products and services. The second one is that sales is not really about persuasion. It's actually about trust and momentum. Now, we do use persuasion in sales and in marketing, but what I learned really was that it's about creating trust with the customer and building momentum. And what I mean by that is when you create trust with somebody, they start listening to you. But they, you know, if you try and just persuade somebody of something, the natural reaction is for them to push back and question it and question your motivation as to why you're trying to persuade them about something. Whereas if you look to just help them understand more about the outcome they're trying to achieve, you build trust very, very quickly. And if you focus your sort of sales process on actually helping your customers understand how they can get the outcome they want and maybe the challenges along the way of how they're going to achieve that, you earn trust very, very quickly because you're actually helping your customer, and helping your customer is the fastest way to build trust. When you build that trust, you're creating momentum because you're starting to help them see the path to getting the outcome they want. And you don't really do that by talking about your products and services directly. You do it by talking about the path that your customer needs to take in order to get what they want. So sales is really about building trust and momentum. And then the third one is that you really do need to choose your customers wisely. And I've learned this the hard way many times. And there's two aspects to this. The reasons you need to choose your customers wisely, number one, it's about understanding clearly who your target market is, because at the end of the day, you want to be focused on the people who you can create the biggest outcome for, have the biggest impact with. You don't really want to be wasting time and effort on customers and opportunities where you're just not the best fit. So that's one reason it helps you to really dial in your sales and marketing if you understand who you can help the most. But the other aspect to this is if you win customers that are not a great fit for your company, the chances are you're going to have potentially a high customer churn rate, but you're also going to probably suffer with trying to look after customers who are just not getting the value that they thought they'd get from becoming your customer. They may try and pull your company, your product in directions you don't really want to take it. And as I say, I've learned this lesson the hard way many times where I've been trying to chase a big logo customer because, it'd be great PR and it'd be a great name to have for the company. And ultimately we found, very hard to win those customers. Very often you end up discounting very, very heavily to win them. And you end up having a painful relationship with them at the end of the day because they're just not the best fit for your product. So, nobody wins in that scenario. So these are the three big lessons, the three big rocks that I would urge you to think about sort of carefully. And you'll see as we play through the rest of this that these are important principles really. Okay, so what is the formula for sales success? Okay, so here it is. It's very, very simple. You may be thinking, what on earth is that? So let's just kind of break it down a little bit. So PV minus PR equals how successful you're going to be. So PV is perceived value. And when I say perceived value, it's the customer's perception of value, okay? Not our own perception. It's really important to put yourself in your customer's shoes when you think about value. As I've already said, value is really associated with the outcome you can help your customers achieve, not the product itself. So perceived value minus perceived risk ultimately determines how successful you'll be as a company, and you know, basically the sales results you're going to get. And perceived risk is something that we need to pay attention to. I call it the silent sales assassin, because perceived risk is often something that your customer sees, but they will not talk to you about. Sometimes they will, if they genuinely have a concern, they see a risk, sometimes they'll bring it up. Often they don't. So there'll be a number of things going through your customer's mind, risks that they see in terms of becoming your customer. You know, if you're a startup, you know, are you going to be around in 2 years' time? You know, are you able to deliver the level of customer support your customer wants? Is your product roadmap solid? You know, is the product good quality? Will it integrate well with their existing environment? So there's a whole range of things that customers will be thinking about in the back of their mind. And, you know, what I found in my sales career, often when I lost a deal, more often than not, it was down to a perceived risk that I didn't address. Okay. So you really need to think carefully about perceived risk, and your whole customer acquisition process should be about maximizing perceived value and minimizing perceived risk. Okay. So it's it's an important formula to think about. So it's just kind of summarizing those 2 key points there. Okay, so let's move on to the 2 main sales challenges. Well, there's 2 key ones. I mean, the one I hear the most, kind of, you know, 80, 90% of the time, is that lead generation is a problem for companies. And typically they can't get enough high quality leads. They can't get them consistently. So lead gen is definitely the number one issue. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Sales conversion is the other one. So maybe you're getting leads, but you're having trouble converting them into customers, into paying customers. And the other thing I often hear in this scenario is that people are having to resort to, you know, constantly heavily discounting their products and services in order just to win a deal. And obviously that's just not sustainable. So those are the two key challenges. Now there is a third, which we're not going to focus on specifically today, but it's customer retention. And this is a particular issue, if you like, or area of concern for SaaS companies or any company that has a subscription type business model. Customer retention is key. And if your customer churn is too high, that can seriously impact your ability to grow. It can have a big impact on your profitability. So customer retention really is something that if you've got an issue with it, it should be your top priority in terms of fixing it, because effectively it means you've got a leaky bucket. So, you know, you put customers into the bucket, but if you've got lots of holes in the bucket and you're losing those customers, the first thing you need to do, the priority, is to fix those holes, you know, to fix your leaky bucket. But that's something that we're not going to focus on that today, but what we're going through by definition will help you to improve customer retention, because if you target the right customers, then you're much less likely to have a customer churn issue. It's when you target the wrong customers, that's when you start having customer churn issues. Okay, so there are 2 underlying problems. When I look at companies I work with, trying to solve these issues around lead generation and sales conversion, there are 2 basically fundamental problems that we see. The first one is what I call a weak customer promise. Now, a customer promise is basically a distilled version of your value proposition. And it talks about 3 things really. It's who you serve, it's the outcome and the results that you help them get, and it's your unique approach. So that basically defines your customer promise. And if you're not crystal clear in all of those 3 areas, it's very hard to get attention. Okay, very hard to get attention and engagement from your prospects. The clearer you are in terms of who you serve, the more focused you are, the clearer you are about the outcome and results you get, the more relevant you're going to be to that prospect base. And it starts with being clear about who you serve, because once you are very clear about who you can help the most, then it's much easier for you to talk specifically about the outcome you can help them achieve, and more specifically, how you help them get that outcome, and why your approach or your unique capability is particularly relevant to that audience. So it's really about differentiation, standing out, and differentiation. The second thing that's the big issue for a lot of companies is they simply don't have an effective customer acquisition process. And that might be that they literally don't have a process. And I see that quite a lot, actually. People, just have an ad hoc way of trying to find potential prospects. Typically they're using their network and their extended network just to try and reach out and find potential prospects. But the reality is, you have to have a simple process to sell consistently. The other thing I see is that where there is a process, they're missing some key elements. And part of what we're going to do next is we're going to look at a framework that you can use to help you build a customer acquisition process that's got the right elements to it. So let's just define really what a customer acquisition process is. So my definition is this: it's a laser-focused process for finding and engaging your ideal prospects and taking them on a simple customer journey that positions a highly compelling offer. Now, there's quite a few key components in that, and we're going to break that down in just a second. But it really is about being focused and keeping things simple. So if we break it down and look at the actual elements, there's kind of four key elements, really. There's the customer promise itself, and the customer promise is really the foundation of your customer acquisition process. It's the thing that clearly identifies who you are, who you help, and what's unique about you. The second element of an effective process is to have a value hook. You need something that you can reach out to your target market, your target audience, that's going to get their attention and get them to engage with you. That really is the beginning of the customer journey. And the goal of the customer journey is to take that prospect on a path really that helps them to understand really how you help them get the outcome they want. And really it's positioning why you are their best option for achieving that outcome. Because customers always have options. You may not have a direct competitor, but you may be competing for budget or for funding. There may be other things they can spend their money on. So the customer journey is really about demonstrating to your customer how you can help them achieve an outcome in a unique way that's particularly relevant to them and their situation. And then at the end of that customer journey, really what you're trying to do is you're getting ready to position your offer, because if you present an offer to a customer at the wrong point, they're not going to be receptive to that offer. So really the customer journey is about getting your prospect to the point where it's natural and logical for them to want to understand your offer, because it's really the next step in them moving towards the outcome they want. So you've helped them understand how you can help them, and that in itself is valuable because you've hopefully given them some insights and some education around the best way to solve their problem or achieve the outcome they want. And your offer really is a transition point. It's about taking them from where they are now to the next level of the relationship, where they use your product or service to actually get the results they want. So those are the four key elements. Now, before we jump into the framework itself, Johnny, this is probably a good time just to pause. I don't know whether we've had any questions yet in the chat box, or if anybody wants to, talk about anything specific. This would be a great point to do that.
Can you give an example of a value hook? Daphne, she said her name. So Daphne says, can you give an example of a value hook?
A value hook. Okay, so a value hook can be lots of different things, and it'll depend on your company really and your type of products or service. But generally, the best type of value hooks that I see are usually they're usually a bit of content. It could be an ad, or it could be a blog post. It's something generally that's going to help your customer get a better insight on the problem they're trying to solve or the outcome they're trying to achieve. So it could be, it could be, as I say, it could be a blog post, an advert. It's really something that's trying to, an example might be to reframe a particular problem that your customer's facing. The idea is to get your customer's attention because there's something they need to know, or there's an insight that would be valuable to them, and they want to know more. They want to engage and take that next step of spending the time to read your article or watch your video. So, I mean, a good example might be, you know, if we take the example of this webinar. So the title of the webinar was deliberately designed to resonate with people who are facing sales and marketing challenges. So it was a very direct hook, if you like, in terms of saying, you know, why you're not getting the sales results you want and how to fix them. That is a value hook, okay? Because what I'm saying is, I'm identifying with a problem that you have, and I'm saying, I'm going to show you how to fix it. I'm going to give you some help in terms of understanding the issue and how to move forward. So that's an example, if you like, of a value hook. It's something that's going to get your customer to say, that's interesting. I need to understand that. I need to know more about it. And the components of a value hook, there's 3 elements to it, really. It needs to be relevant, it needs to be engaging, and it needs to be valuable, okay? So relevant means you're talking to the right audience about the right topic, and that should be directly associated with the outcome that they want or the problem you're helping them solve. It needs to be engaging, it needs to be something that's gonna enable them to, or encourage them to commit a little bit of time to read something, watch something, listen to something. And that engagement also needs to have a next step to it, okay? So there needs to be some kind of call to action at the end of it that moves them forward, okay? And that move forward needs to be a small step. It's really important that off the back of your value hook, the next step that you want your customer to take needs to be a relatively small step, okay? We call it a micro commitment. If you ask them to move too far early on in the sales process, it creates friction, and it's hard to move your customer forward. As you get further into the customer journey, you're building trust and you're building momentum with them because you're adding value, you're helping them. You can start to ask them to take bigger steps, okay? But the key is to use a very compelling value hook, speak to a problem, speak to something that's going on in their mind right now, give them something valuable that's going to help them, and give them a next step that's easy to do and is very low risk, okay? I hope that answers the question. So there's loads of different value hooks you can create, but I think this webinar probably is a good example in terms of the title and what we're covering.
Yeah, and I guess we'll move on to section 2 in a second. We'll definitely just follow this up with what could be a first initial small commitment step you ask for them. Anything that's quick we could just answer?
Yeah, I mean, so it could be as simple as, asking them for, I mean, it depends. Okay, so the smallest step really is, click this link to watch this video without requiring the customer to key in any email address or to give you anything. Just, click here to learn, to watch this video about, about the title or whatever. Or you could say, okay, I want you to click this title, watch this video, and then at the end of that video, there might be another step that says, if you'd like a slightly more in-depth, report on this, or we have a slightly more in-depth video that's a webinar, for example, click here, provide your email address, click here, and you'll get access to the webinar or whatever the content is. It could be anything, but the principle is make it highly relevant. Don't ask for anything much to start with. Make it easy for the customer to engage with it, and then just offer a simple next step that's easy and they don't have to commit too much to it. So, you know, providing an email address, for example, it is not going to be a massive commitment if you've clearly demonstrated that you've got some value to bring. Okay. Whereas if you go straight to saying, you know, let's have a call, or sign up for a trial, that may be a step too far, too early on in the process. To an extent, it depends on your product or service and the value of your product and service. Because in the B2C world, your customer journey can be extremely short. It can happen in a single sales page on a website. Whereas with a high value B2B product or service, that customer journey might happen over many, many months. And there may be several key steps that you've got to take your customer through. But the principle is the same. You're trying to get your customer to understand that you know where they're at and you know how to get them to where they want to be. That's really the job of the customer journey. And the offer at the end of that customer journey is just the natural transition point where they're seriously ready to become a customer, because you've proven to them in their own mind, in the customer's mind, that you, more than anyone else, have a unique way of helping them get the outcome they want. And
I think that's really solid there, Ian. I think, you know, maybe a follow-up for this would be a webinar on human nature, how we've evolved from cavemen up to now, you know, in terms of probably potentially the psychological triggers or whatever, you know, that makes you see the value, and for whatever reason, that's why. So Daphne's put in the box there, so perfect, thank you. So there's some really good examples there as well.
Great. Okay. Hope that's helpful. Okay. Is there any more questions there, Johnny, or?
I think we're ready to move on, to be honest. There'll be, I think we'll obviously have some questions at the end as well, if we're halfway through. So sounds good to me.
Yeah. Okay, great. We'll move on. Okay. So I wanted to kind of share this framework with you. So this is something I created. It's called the Sales Acceleration Canvas. And I use this really as a framework with companies to help them create a customer acquisition process. So you can see there's a number of elements to it. And basically we go through it from left to right at the top, and then moving down to the bottom. So really what this does is it helps you to think about the key elements of a customer acquisition process. And having a framework, I think, just helps make sure you're not missing out any of the key elements. And the key really is to start with the customer promise, because as I said before, it's really critical to be absolutely laser focused on who you serve, which is really who you can help the most. The way to think about that is, who can we help the most? Okay, you probably can help lots of people with your product or service. The thing you want to be thinking about is, who can we help the most? Who gets the most value out of the outcomes we help people to achieve? And what is the most important outcome? Again, because you might have a very clear target market and you may have lots of benefits to your product or service, but the thing to think about is, what is the one big thing? Okay, what's the one big thing that we really move the needle on for our customers? Because if you talk about lots of different things, you actually dilute the impact of your message. And it's a bit counterintuitive, because you think, well, surely the more things I can do for my customer, the more benefits, the more positive outcomes they get from being our customer, the better that is. And while that's true to an extent, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get attention, we're trying to engage with people. And the best way to do that is to be laser focused on one thing, the biggest thing, the most important thing. Okay. Once you engage with people, there may be lots of additional value you can provide, but that comes further downstream. You don't want to confuse the message up front by talking about too many benefits. Just identify what is the big important outcome you can help your customers with. And what pain do you help them avoid? Is your solution about solving a problem, a painful problem that the customer has? Or is it about maybe helping them avoid the pain of transition? So they are where they are. They want to get to a different point. They want a different kind of outcome, or they want to solve a problem. But maybe the process that they have to go through is challenging. Maybe your solution is less challenging than other options they may have. So you need to be clear about, if there's any pain you help them avoid, you need to be clear about that point, okay? Because people are very motivated to move away from pain rather than towards gain. Often they're two sides of the same coin. You know, customer wants to solve a problem because it's going to have a beneficial outcome for them, and it's going to, you know, reduce some pain that they're currently in. It's the pain that they focus on. Okay, the pain is the thing that will drive behavior more than the motivation of a gain. So think about that in terms of what is it you help your customers to avoid, and what is your unique value. Now, unique value needs to relate to your customer promise in terms of the outcome. Okay, what a lot of companies tend to do is they think of their unique value as being, you know, a particular feature of their product. And whilst that feature may be directly relevant to the value you provide, you've got to describe your unique value. You've got to communicate it in a way that relates to the customer's outcome, okay? Because that's what the customer is focused on. That's what they care about. That's what's going through their mind. So your unique value needs to be positioned in a way that directly relates to the outcome. So that's the promise, and that's the foundation really of the rest of the process. So you need to get that bit right. The second bit is the audience, which is really just being clear about who specifically cares the most about the outcome that you help them with, who is the best fit. Not everybody's going to be the best fit for your product or service, or even for your company. I mean, this can even come down to the culture of your company, whether the culture of your company is a good fit with the culture of the kind of target market or customer base you're targeting. So who cares the most? Who is the best fit? And again, that maybe could relate to, best fit might relate to, if you're selling an IT product, does their existing IT environment, is it easy for you to bring your technology into their current environment? So that's another example of best fit. And where do they hang out? Because at the end of the day, the value hook that you're going to use, you've got to, if you like, dangle that hook in the right place. So you've got to figure out where's your target audience hang out. You know, are they on LinkedIn? Is it Facebook? Are they members of certain industry organizations? Where are you most likely to be able to get your initial value hook in front of them? And then the customer journey is really, is really, you know, just understanding the path really that your customer needs to take from becoming aware of who you are and what you do, all the way through to being ready and keen to actually hear your offer. So you need to think about the value hooks that you're going to use to get them engaged initially. Then what are the key next steps? Remember, I talked about small steps to start with, and then the steps can become bigger as you go through the process. Obviously, in B2C, this might be a very, very short process, but what are the key steps the customer needs to go through in order to get to the point where they're ready for the offer? And what is the messaging you need to use for each step? You need to drive that momentum. You need to drive the customer forward. So what is the key messaging that you need to come up with that drives each step? And then the offer itself, well, this is a really key component. This is the thing, more than anything else, this is usually the thing that determines how well you can convert prospects into customers. The offer is the biggest element in most cases. And again, it's about thinking, how can you create outstanding value? Remember, we talked about, you know, sales success was down to perceived value minus the perceived risk. So how can you build in tremendous value into your offer? And obviously the flip side, how can you minimize risks? There's a number of things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. A number of things you can do to minimize the risk associated with, you know, that customers or prospects may associate with your company or your product. And how can you make it simple? The simpler your offer, the easier it will convert. Now, obviously there's a fine line. Depending on the complexity of your product or service, you may not be able to make it extremely simple, but the simpler you can make it, the better. The fewer options you give people, you know, generally the better. You may have heard of the analogy of, there was a test, I can't remember who did this test, but they tested selling jams in a marketplace, and they had one stall where they just offered 6 jams, and they had another stall where there was a range of 24 jams. These were, you know, homemade craft jams, if you like. And the stall that only had 6 jams converted 30% of the people who visited the stall. And the customer that had, the stall that had 24 jams only converted 3% of the people who visited that stall, which to me, you know, that's a massive difference. Now, on the one hand, you think, well, surely if customers have more choice, they're much more likely to find what they want. But the reality is, and this is where we come back to psychology again, the reality was that too much choice is confusing for people. Okay, so the concept of simplicity is really important throughout everything you do. You know, the simpler your products are, the simpler your offers are, the more traction you'll get with people. So with your offer, make it as simple as you can. And then finally, the final box is about systems. And really, this really just speaks to the point that another thing that I've realized with a lot of companies is, you know, as I say, some companies don't have a consistent process. Some have a process that's got some missing pieces. But the other big issue is some organizations just aren't very consistent at executing the process. And this is where tools come in. Understanding what tools will help you execute your customer acquisition process consistently and effectively. You need to think about what tool is going to help you the most. Do you need a CRM system? Do you need an email autoresponder? Do you need a LinkedIn Sales Navigator account? You know, what skills and people do you need? Do you need someone who's good at copywriting? Do you need someone who's good at producing an animated video? You know, because all of these things might be part of your customer acquisition process. So you need to make sure you've got the right systems, the skills, and the tools to operate that process effectively. So that's the sales acceleration canvas. Actually, Johnny, I'm thinking just maybe now's a good time just to see if there's any questions on that framework.
Yeah, I think, you know, if anybody has got any question on the framework, I think it goes, you know, obviously there's a lot there in case anybody's got any questions. One question I was going to say, so obviously this is an ongoing process and you have different buckets and different customers along at each stage. Yeah. You know, like, especially for some startups who maybe are a small team as well, how much time would you say you'd spend your week doing this? And like, you know, say you were looking for new leads, you know, we only have, depends how much you work, whether you work 40 hours a week or 80 hours a week, you know, it's kind of up to the individual, but how much time would you spend on lead gen? How much time would you say crafting offers that are potentially very tailor-made, knowing that the payoff's going to be there? You know, do you have a flow of like, you know, how much stuff you should be doing on a weekly basis?
You know, it's really hard for me to sort of guide people on that because it does depend so much on where you are with your company at the minute, how you know, the resources you have available to you or not, as the case may be. But what I would say is this, you know, I think being successful in business, a lot of it, and it applies to, you know, sales as well, is, you know, leveraging your time effectively. And what I will say is using this process and using this framework will give you, or it should give you, a huge return on investment on your time, because this is giving you the structure and it's giving you the focus. This really, the reason I created this canvas was to distill it down into the core elements, the basic points. You know, it's the 80-20 rule. This is, you know, this is the 20% of stuff you need to really focus on to get 80% of the results.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, you know, use the framework as a guide, to help keep you focused so that you're not going off track, spending lots and lots of time on tactics that don't really fit with your business model, you know, the latest and greatest marketing ideas, because without a framework and a process that you're applying them to, you're really burning time, energy, and money and all those other things. Yeah. So yeah, you know, as I always say to people, you know, the focus is really key, and what this does, it will keep you focused.
Can I also just ask, we have got a question coming, which I'll just get to in a second, but I mean, I don't know if it's a fallacy that B2B sales are easier, if that's the right word to use it, but, you know, from experience, I've found if you're dealing with, you know, business, you can say, look, spend £1 with us and it's going to generate £3 in sales. It's a very easy, proposition to be able to sell, even if it's fairly blunt to be able to sell it. But it's harder on B2C potentially, where people can't potentially see the value. There's always do I have to pay for this service? Maybe it's harder. Is that a fallacy, or from your experience like that?
Well, I think it totally varies. I mean, I think what you're saying there is what it's easy to do generally in the B2B world is calculate an ROI, a return on investment. But even in B2B, it's often not easy to do that, to be fair, because the outcomes your customer want don't always directly relate to cost savings. Now, obviously, if you've got a product or service that helps people save money, then great. It's usually quite easy to demonstrate a clear return on investment. Most of the time, though, it's not so easy to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second, actually. So
I think that might tie in with the question. We have about 10 minutes left of this webinar anyway, so maybe I'll ask Daphne's question, which is on LinkedIn outreach at the end. It might make a bit more sense on this next section anyway. So I'll let you get on with that next section, and we'll just ask any remaining questions at the end here.
Cool. Okay. Right. We'll crack on. Okay. So we're not going to go through this now, but this is something, if people, maybe if they have a recording of this or whatever they have access to, maybe a copy of the slides or something. This is just an exercise you can go through to help you really dial in your customer promise. So it's a sentence that you complete basically. And when you first go through this sentence, it can be as long as you like. Okay. You can use as much wordy text as you want to help you just get your thoughts out. And basically it says, we help, and then you describe your perfect customer. 2, and then you describe the most important outcome you help them achieve. And then you say by, and then you describe the essence of what makes you unique in terms of how you get that outcome for them. And then without, and you highlight the pain you help them avoid. You can play around with that structure, but it's just a useful structure to work with to start with, to really try and distill down the essence of your customer promise. Because the goal is to try and get it down to about 30 words or less, and then test it with someone who is your target customer or target prospect, and just see whether they get it. Do they understand it? It should be really obvious to them what you do and how you help them and why you are unique. So that's just a little exercise that you can use to get your customer promise right, because that really is the key to the rest of the framework. In terms of a customer journey, I just want to sort of run through this very quickly. So I use something I came up with called the Uber model. So I said that a customer journey was a simple path that really takes someone from being aware of who you are and what you do to being ready and receptive to your offer. And there's kind of 3 or 4 key steps, I guess. It's understanding why you are relevant to them, belief that you can deliver your promise, i.e. help them get the outcome they want, excitement that you bring unique value. That's really important, because at the end of the day, this is basically how you differentiate yourself, is the unique value that you bring, your unique approach, or even your unique perspective on how someone gets the outcome they want. And then finally, it's getting them receptive to hear your offer, to look at your offer. So that's the customer journey. That's a simple model you can follow, and then you just kind of build the steps. You think, okay, well, how do we ensure that customers realize we're relevant? What kind of evidence or information do we need to provide them to help them understand that we really do know where they are and where they want to get to, and that we have a solution to get them there. And excitement that you do have a genuinely unique way, a unique approach for that particular market, for that particular audience, that is particularly compelling or useful for them. Okay, so that's the concept behind the customer journey. It's a series of steps. Ideally, you want the fewest number of steps, but if you try and cut that customer journey too short, particularly in the B2B world with high value products, you'll lose customers along the way. But yeah, the idea is obviously not to make it too long either. You just need a simple, clear process on what your customer needs to understand before they're ready to receive your offer. So let's talk about the offer itself. So I call it the irresistible offer because that's ideally what you want it to be, irresistible to your customers. And there's 4 key elements to it, really. It needs to be simple, and we've already talked about that. The more options you have, the more confusing it can be to your customers, hence the jam example we talked about earlier on. It needs to maximize perceived customer value. So what you're really trying to do with your offer is package in as much as you can that's going to actually help your customer get the results they want. So maybe you're bundling products and services together because you know that the product on its own, if the customer just bought the product, they're not going to get the result they want without some services wrapped around it. So maximize perceived value, give them everything they need or as much as you can to help them get the outcome they want. You need to minimize perceived risk. This is critical, and we talked about it earlier on. So there's a number of ways you can do that in an offer. You can offer guarantees, money back guarantees. You could maybe offer a pay-as-you-go model where they're not committing a large amount of money up front. You can include the services or help they might need or education they might need that they might think, well, we're not sure we really understand how to use this technology. The more you can bundle in to help them reduce the level of perceived risk, the more compelling your offer is going to be. And then finally, this is just how to think about pricing. So this is where we think about return on investment. What I always say to people is, what you need to try and do is just think about what would your customer pay if you could wave a magic wand and give them the outcome they want, literally in an instant, click of a finger. What would that be worth to your customer? How much would they pay for that? Okay. Now that's going to depend on the size of the outcome that you help your customers achieve. It's going to depend on the size of your customers, what's affordable, what's not affordable, because the reality is you could deliver the huge amount of value to your customers, but if your product's unaffordable, it's unaffordable. You've got to be positioned in the right space within the market in terms of is your solution affordable? But what you're really aiming for is what I would call a 10-to-1 return on investment, or a perceived value that's 10 times the price. So if you're charging $100 for your product, is the outcome in the mind of the customer worth $1,000? Now, sometimes that's very subjective, okay, but genuinely your gut feel is going to be right. That's what I would say, because hopefully you understand your target market and your target audience, and you can ask yourself that question and say, I'm going to charge $100 for this product. Does my customer get something that they would pay $1,000 for if I could wave a magic wand and give it to them right now? And if the answer is yes, then you're delivering compelling value. If it's less than 10 times, it still might be a perfectly good offer, but the target baseline that I always work to is 10x. If you can 10x the value compared to the price, you definitely have a very compelling offer. Okay, so that's the how to put together basically, the things to think about when you're building an irresistible offer. So key takeaways, just summarize these quickly. Customers want outcomes, not products. Focus on the outcome. Focus your sales and marketing and your messaging, 70%, let's say, 60-70% on the outcome, not on your product. Your customer promise is the foundation of your customer acquisition process. So it's worth spending time really dialing in your customer promise, really getting that crystal clear. And your customer acquisition process is the foundation for sales success. Without a consistent process, it's really, really hard to get consistent sales results. And the key to creating a powerful customer acquisition process is to keep it simple and keep it laser focused. Okay. Right. That's it really. The only thing I was going to say in terms of next step, hopefully the sales acceleration canvas will be useful to you, and some of the points I made about putting an offer together, and also hopefully those 3 principles at the beginning that we went through. I hope those will be valuable to you, and I hope you can take those straight into your business now and start using those tools. If you feel it would be useful to have a chat with me one-to-one, this is not a sales call. This is genuinely me trying to help you out. If you've got a sales challenge that you're wrestling with, because obviously we've got lots of different types of business on the call, so by definition, I've had to be fairly generic today. But if you want to talk about a specific issue, a specific challenge, you want some ideas on the best sales strategy to use, just use that email address below there. Reach out to me via email. Let me know. We'll schedule a 30-minute call, and we'll just try and move you forward, depending on what your situation is. So that's free. There's no hard sell on it. I'll literally just try and help you, move you forward if I can. Yeah, that's open to anyone who's on the call. The other thing I'll just mention while we're here is that I'm currently beta testing a new program. It's called a Sales Acceleration Sprint. It's an 8-week one-to-one program. And basically the format is we do a 1-hour Zoom call each week, and a number of phone calls and emails in between times as required. And the goal is really to build a customer acquisition process as quickly as possible and to accelerate sales as quickly as possible. That's the goal of the program. So I'm beta testing that at the minute with one customer. I need 2 more customers to get into the beta program. There is a cost associated with it, but if that's something that people are interested in, then again, reach out to me on that email address, and I'll be happy to sort of let you know a bit more about that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ian. I think I just want to say on behalf of everybody here today, it's been a really kind of insightful and kind of very digestible presentation from you today. So, we appreciate that. I think there's so many takeaways. It's very natural. Each slide flows into each other, which is, I guess, basically what a sales process should be as well. So yeah, I would just say to pretty much anybody on this call, if you found today interesting, book some time in here with Ian. Ian is one of our Manchester members, and I'll be setting up some office hours officially with Ian, obviously in the in the coming weeks ahead. But I would say, strike while iron's hot, reach out to Ian here individually. And then basically what we will do is, hopefully you can start that dialogue with him and start to close a lot more sales. So I'm just actually going to put this one, Dan has put in here as well. Daphne did have a very, very quick question. We'll literally just ask one question before we have to zoom off, which was, what's your thoughts on cold emailing people on LinkedIn to get sales? Personally, I think it maybe ties into what you were saying before about finding people on their own platforms, but unless I'm missing something, she said she does B2B SaaS. She says, how's cold acquisition on LinkedIn? How do you go about that?
Yeah. I think if you're B2B SaaS, LinkedIn is probably a very good platform to use, actually. Yes, LinkedIn can be very useful. I think it comes down to your approach. What I would say is just reach out to people, keep it really, really simple, and offer some value. Okay, so don't make it salesy. Just literally offer them some kind of insight. So if you've got an insight that's going to help them understand a problem better, understand how they achieve an outcome that they're interested in, just offer some value. So again, relevant, engaging, valuable. Make it relevant to them, make it engaging, make it valuable. Just avoid it sounding salesy or pushy in any way. Just help them. The biggest thing I could say to is reach out to someone on LinkedIn like it was someone you knew, a pal who's got a business, and you'd say, hey, this could be useful. Okay, if you're wrestling with this, or if you're looking to try and achieve this, you might find this useful.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I mean, it's a numbers game as well, I think, but also doing your due diligence and making sure it's not too scattergun is so important. Otherwise, you're just wasting everybody's time, really. People are having to read a message that isn't relevant. They don't see any value. Okay, you might find a few rough gems in there who you didn't know would like your service, but I think, offering that value and finding people where they are is so important. So yeah, I just want to say a big thanks, Ian. We all appreciate you taking your time today to present to us. I look forward when we get back to the real world of being able to have you into our Manchester lab for a one-on-one session, and obviously some, like office hours with our members. But Ian's email is put in the chat box there, so please do reach out to him. And look after yourself. We'll catch up with you soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, have a great day.
Yes, you too. Take care.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.